Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Got me? Good morning. If we could find our seats, we'll go ahead and begin this morning. Okay, well, we're turning me up right there. Okay, so good morning. Good morning. I'll tell you what, the Buffalo Bills fan has nothing on the Owen County Legislative Breakfast fans, let me tell you, all right? It's cold outside, and we've got an awesome group. I had so many people say, are you going to cancel tomorrow? And I'm like, no, because I know there are going to be people there. So, again, I just want to thank you guys for being here. And I also want to just start off by thanking our sponsor. This event is sponsored by the Owen County State Bank. So let's go ahead and give them a hand and thank them for sponsoring today. We also have our sponsor, Main Street Coffee, for our coffee this morning. And then also, as always, the Owen Valley Christian Fellowship hosts us every year, and we appreciate that. So let's give them a hand as well, please. Today, we are joined by Representative Bob Heaton and Senator Eric Bassler, and I want to thank both of them for coming out and traversing all of the roads and the weather to be here with us. We appreciate you, gentlemen, and for everything that you do for us. Let's give them a hand as well. And finally, I want to thank all of those who are joining us online. And before we go ahead and continue this morning, I just want to make sure and let everybody know a few housekeeping rules, because we do go ahead and put the legislative breakfast online. When you have a question this morning, if you would, just raise your hand, and then County Councilman Anton Neff will call on you. And then if you'll wait just a moment for me to come over with this mic, if you would please ask your question into the mic. That way the people who are joining us online can hear your question, and therefore they understand the response. I'd really appreciate that. And so without further ado, I want to also go ahead and introduce and thank once again our moderator for 2024, County Councilman Anton Neff.
I think this is the first time I'm using glasses for this, so it happens, right? Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome. It's definitely a cold start for our first legislative breakfast, but that's expected in January. But we are going to be warmed up with a good conversation today, and we're very thankful to have our state legislators with us. A lot of you are regulars and know the process, and we welcome you back. And we do ask that folks remain respectful and civil, of course, in the discussion and asking of the questions. We're going to cover a wide variety of topics based on what you all ask about, but we are going to let each legislator give a brief opening and talk a little bit about the session. I do want to point out that if you've not already been there or looked at it, the General Assembly has a part of Indiana's website where they have all information you can possibly imagine about every bill, the schedule, links to the live feeds for hearings, votes, etc. It's iga.in.gov. So iga.in.gov. It's a great resource to look up bill information and the latest status for those. Also, you have handouts that each legislator had brought. So these have been circulating. We've got a brochure and a couple of other flyers here. That has information that they want to share with you about the session and some of their priorities. I also want to share that February 5th and 6th are the final days for third reading of bills. So whatever the House has been considering, whatever the Senate has been considering, those bills, if they make it that far, they have to pass out of those House of Origins by those dates in order for them to flip sides. And that would be February 5th and 6th. And then February 14th is the statutory deadline to adjourn the session. However, it's my understanding they may want to end a little earlier than that. So they've been moving at a very fast clip. I know Ways and Means has been meeting and lengthy and has been churning the bills and the activity out. They are very eager to get through this short session as efficiently and quickly as possible. So with us first, I'll introduce Eric Bassler. He's a state senator that represents primarily the southern part of Owen County. And then after that, we'll have Representative Heaton, who represents all of Owen County, give his intro. So Eric, would you like to start us off?
Happy to. Good morning. Thanks for coming out. I'm pleasantly surprised there's such good attendance on such a cold day like this. So it's good for all of you to come out this morning. As Anton said, my name is Eric Bassler, and I represent Senate District 39 in the Indiana Senate. And just to kind of give you a feel, that's like he said, the lower half of Owen County, Olive Green, most of Sullivan, and then all of Knox, all of Davies, and all of Martin counties. And so this is my 10th legislative session, and we are moving along rather quickly, and we are required to finish up by March 14th this year. This is considered what's called a short session. And I'm working on several bills this session, some related to the State Board of Accounts and how they kind of audit and kind of oversee, if you will, many areas of government when it comes to the auditing process. Also, financial institutions, working on a bill related to financial institutions. Let's see what else. One related to property taxes, specifically related to homeowners. And then I'm on the Appropriations Committee, the Environmental Affairs Committee, Ethics, and then doesn't really play much of a role this year since it's not a budget year, but also involved with the K-12 funding. So happy that all of you are here, and I'm glad to be here myself. I'll turn it over to my dear colleague.
Okay, there we go. All right, thanks for everybody being here, and great turnout. Just you people over here are pretty tough. Clay County, they canceled, and their meeting's supposed to be at 10 when it's that much warmer. But thanks for being here, and really appreciate it. And I think this is the first time I ran out of handouts. I apologize for that. But well, it is a short session, and as I've told people up at the State House, hopefully it's going to be short and sweet. But boy, you just never know. You know, my district goes from the federal penitentiary in Terre Haute down to the west side of Bloomington, and the reason I mention that, I had the prison nurse at the federal penitentiary this past year approached me and wanted me to file a bill that pertained basically just for her and her associates there at the federal penitentiary. And it's, I want to say it's House Bill 1218. I haven't printed it out, but anyway, it basically deals with, I don't want to get into the details, but indecent exposure to especially like to female employees there at the federal penitentiary. But I don't think it's going to get a hearing. I talked to Wendy McNamara, who is chairperson of the Courts and Criminal Committee, and so. But anyway, we'll see if that does eventually get a hearing and so forth. But we have been off and running since January the 8th. It was and hopefully our goal is to get out as soon as we can, and sometime in the early part of March. But we did have a bill this past Thursday that passed out on third reading, and it happened to be House Bill 1002, and it's on the handout that I mentioned to you here. But it supports the Jewish students at universities and so forth, and we had some demonstrations up there, and that's all good, and it was peaceful and so forth. But they were, they were saying shame on you when we all made that vote, and every Republican and Democrat voted for this bill. It passed 84-0, and a year ago we had the same bill, and it passed, I believe, 94-0, and and I felt like telling those people, where were you last year when we voted on this bill? But anyway, and then so it's going to go over to the Senate and see what they'll take a look at it. And I think there was an issue last year, possibly because of the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and I think it wasn't brought up over in the Senate. But we'll see how it goes this session. So it is, we're really getting into a lot of it right now as far as the bills and so forth. And as Anton mentioned, Ways and Means. I'm on Ways and Means as well as Financial Institutions as far as my two committees that I'm on. And but in Ways and Means on Wednesday, I think I don't know, Anton or others, see on live stream that we have up at the State House and some of these committee hearings. But I think it lasted about 6 hours, and we had one bill. It was House Bill 1199 that basically just dealt with Marion County. And we didn't get a vote on it or anything, but there was an issue about enhanced economic districts, and it's just within a mile square of downtown, but dealt with funding and so forth. But so it was a good discussion, pro and against that bill, but we'll see how that goes later on. As I tell people, a lot of times we deal with bills that 99.99% of the people are involved in, just like my bill. But it does make a difference to a very few people out there, and so sometimes we're dealing with bills like that. So anyway, thanks for being here, and I appreciate everybody coming, and stay safe and healthy and warm. Thanks.
All right, so we're going to have a good hour and 15 minutes available for Q&A. If we don't get to every question, sometimes they will be here, especially with Bob and Clay County canceling, there'll be an opportunity to have some follow-up with the legislators after the event. But we are going to randomly call on individuals that may have a question by looking at a show of hands. And remember that Marcy does have a microphone that she's going to be bringing to you first so people online can hear. And people that are online, if you have questions, be sure to let us know and we'll incorporate those as well. So, who would like to be our first question of the morning? Andy. Microphone's on the way. And we do ask that you be very clear, concise, and efficient with your questions.
I'll be very efficient.
Okay, good.
So as you know, Article 8 is about our common schools, and that is where most of our property tax ends up going. And a good part of the Article 8 specifies funding that no longer exists. And it was never supposed to be the case that personal property tax was any part of that common school fund, because the whole point of having state-funded schools was that you wouldn't have poor schools in poor areas and rich schools in rich areas. That it was supposed to be common schools, the same across the state. We lost that decades ago when we lost the whole endowment fund for school funding. And all that's specified in Article 8. And what frustrates me is that our property taxes, especially after 2010 when we really screwed up, the whole Article 10, that was ridiculous. And property taxes on my own farm have gone up like triple in just the last few years. And I know a lot of people are just dying under property tax, and it's mostly because of the school funding business that we screwed up fundamentally a long time ago. Is there anybody looking at that?
When you say looking at that, I guess which aspect of it, with respect to the property tax, such a large percentage of property taxes going to school funding, or?
Well, it's not the percentage going to school funding, it's that any of it is coming from personal property tax. If you look at what Article 8 actually says, it has every other form of taxation in there, and sale of state properties and all kinds of stuff. Never mentions personal property tax, and of course, Article 1, Section 25 says that anything that's not specifically allowed government is specifically denied. And so we should not be taxed for, personal property tax should not be going to schools, because you're asking poor people to lift themselves up by their bootstraps, and you're giving rich people what they would get anyway without the tax.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you make several valid points. We are seeing, to a large extent, kind of wealthy school districts, if you will, and then poorer school districts, and it makes it very challenging for the poorer school districts to provide the same quality of education as the ones that have more money coming in. And the main mechanism that leads to that inequality is the use of the property taxes to fund local schools. I'm not a big fan of property taxes. It seems like, and then again, this is my 10th legislative session, and I almost never hear people complain about income tax or sales tax or, I guess probably maybe a little bit about the gasoline tax, but what I hear people mostly complain about is property taxes. And it just so happens, by coincidence, I've got a bill this session that would eliminate property taxes on personal residences. Wouldn't eliminate them on, you know, businesses and farmland and so forth, but would on personal residences. I don't think that's going to have much carry this year, because we're talking about doing some tax restructuring next year. I mean, I would sure be open to the idea of elimination of property taxes. But having said that, and probably people are thinking, yeah, great, let's get rid of it. Okay, that's all fine and good, but you think about the sheer number of dollars that property taxes generate, and all those dollars pay for something. And when you think about property taxes specifically, the biggest chunk, about half or so, goes to school corporations. It's all fine and good to eliminate something, but then number one, where are you going to come up with the dollars to replace that? It's either you got to cut spending somewhere, and that would be very challenging to cut back the sheer amount of dollars that need to be cut to do that, or another revenue source. And I'm definitely open to other revenue sources. When we got our tax bill, I guess it was maybe it was whenever they come out in May or June or what have you, or maybe it was before that. Yours probably went up just like mine did. And I was joking with Julie that I almost feel like I'm renting my own home now. I live in kind of a very middle-class neighborhood. It's a big old house, but it's just kind of it's not a really fancy neighborhood or anything, not real expensive homes, but I'm amazed at how much I'm paying for just property taxes on my home, not to mention, for example, the two small businesses that Julie has and so forth. So the long and short of it is, I've definitely been in support of whatever cutting back or eliminating property taxes, but the question then becomes, where does that funding then come from to replace it? Indiana's in a good fiscal shape right now. We have been as long as I've been in the legislature. So maybe there's a mechanism where instead of cutting these taxes here, maybe we somehow cut back, or at least, I don't know if we'd be able to eliminate property taxes, but at least cut back on them. And so keep these taxes in place, because there's different people talking about eliminating the Indiana income tax and various other taxes and fees, so maybe we keep those in place in order to fund the local schools. Around 40, I can't remember now, probably about 47% of the state budget goes towards local schools. We need to keep doing a good job funding our local schools. If you did a calculation, my gut instinct is our school funding over the last 10 years, 15 years, I hate to say this, but I question whether it's kept up with the rate of inflation. And so in some ways that means a little bit less each year because of just simply the inflation factor. So I know that wasn't a real detailed answer as far as what the answer is of what your question is, but I would definitely be open to some different ideas and suggestions on how we could at least cut back on the property taxes, or at least slow their growth or something, because it's been up a lot over the last probably 6 or 8 years or so. But thanks for being here, and thanks for bringing that issue up.
There we go. Andy, thanks for being here, and I appreciate the question. And I guess the short answer is no. I haven't heard anything up there at the State House as far as who filed anything. I don't know if you're aware of anybody that you've talked to that has maybe filed something. But the thing about the property taxes, I've got some stories here, but about 30-some years ago, one of the wealthiest farmers in Vigo County, his name was Paul Hass, and I was with Paul fishing one time, of all places, at his place up in Canada. He said, you know, Bob, we're up there talking in the boat, and he says, you know, because of property taxes, I will never own my farm. Everything's paid for, but I'll never own it because of the property taxes. And I thought, oh, you're right. But, you know, something you don't think about every day. But that's so true. My taxes, I live south of Terre Haute in Vigo County, out in the country. I'm back a lane. I've got my land around me and so forth, and I like my privacy. But I pay for that in my taxes. That's around, I guess you could look it up, but it's around $5,000 a year, you know. And it was here, and then it just keeps creeping up little by little. And about 5 or 6 years ago, my daughter and son-in-law, they and 5 grandchildren, they live on the east side of Terre Haute. And they lived in a subdivision, and their house was built like in the middle 70s. So they lived in a house that was over 40-some years old. And 5, 6 years ago, they moved to Clay County. And so just actually about a mile west of North Clay, Northview schools over there. And nice house that was built about 15 years ago, 1.3 acre parcel lot. And they love it. And after they moved and so forth, I mentioned to Allison, my daughter, I said, well, hey, how's your taxes over there? You know, knowing that in Vigo County they're higher than Clay County. And she says, well, Dad, they're okay. You know, it's $670. I said, well, that's not too bad twice a year. No, Dad, that's for the whole year. I go, wow. And in a way, I've been looking to get back to Clay County, but anyway, I can't find anything. So, but you know, you got to remember too, when you talk about property taxes, it's a local tax. You know, and the state can do only so much, but you know, Vigo County, you know, their taxes are up. Clay County, they're down, so to speak. And Owen over here, I hear the same issue over here about property taxes and so forth. And I think, you know, Monroe's in the same boat and so forth. But I talked to a friend of mine about a year ago who lives north of Indianapolis in Westfield, you know, where Grant Park is, and they got a lot going on up there, you know. And their taxes for their house and half acre is over $10,000 now. And she told me that, well, in about a year or two, we're moving. You know, and due to the property taxes situation there and so forth, but there is a limit, you know. And I heard, matter of fact, last night went out with a couple, and they were talking about, I think in Illinois, and up in the Chicago area, but maybe 30 miles out, and their relation lives in a subdivision. And they pay $2,000 a month in property taxes. 24, I think it's actually $26,000 a year is what they pay. And it's just, well, it's just, again, there's a limit. And when people are going to say, I'm out of here. And they said in that subdivision, they were out of about 12 homes, about 5 of them were up for sale. And but there's got to be some type of control when it comes to property taxes and so forth. And I know Senator Bassler mentioned about income tax. I know Lieutenant Governor Suzanne Crouch is talking about eliminating that. And well, and that would be nice. And I don't know exactly what Tennessee does or Florida and so forth. But to give you an idea, by being on Ways and Means, we had this discussion years ago, but at that time, Governor Pence wanted to, have on his resume that he lowered the income tax here in Indiana. And so we did. We went from 3.42% down to 3.23%, 19 basis points. Well, at the time, I told my colleague in there, I said, why don't we just go to 3%? You know, let's bring it down, you know. But it was 19 basis points. And I remember this past summer in the Republican debates and so forth, Governor Pence or Vice President Pence, he made a comment about, well, in Indiana, we lowered the income taxes. And some of us thought, well, he wants that on his resume someday, and boom, there it was. But and we did that. But now, a year ago, our intent is now to keep lowering that down from, and I think at this, from 3.23 down to 2.9%. Okay, and right now, currently, it's at 3.05%. I think in January of 2027, it's supposed to be down to 2.9. And if you're wondering why it was 2.9 and not 2.7 or whatever, because North Dakota was a state that their rate is 2.9%. So we wanted to bring it down to be even with North Dakota. So, but anyway, it's trending in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. But like Senator Bassler said, you know, those millions that's collected and goes out to whether it's Medicaid or whatever, or Department of Child Services or whatever it may be, you know, you can't eliminate that too, but something's got to be looked at and studied and so forth. But I know it's a I hate to use the word hate, but I hate paying taxes, and I pay quarterly taxes too, and it's a tough thing. So, but Andy, as of now, I don't know what bills, and we've got, I want to say, over 1,000 or so bills people filed up there, but I'll look into it.
All right, for our next question, does anybody else have a property tax related follow-up or question? Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm an interloper. I do live in Monroe County, but I have a suggestion about the referendums. You and I talked momentarily at a basketball game. The problem we have with a lot of referendums is in the cities and towns that have universities. Terre Haute has it. We're full of people from New York and California, and they don't pay property taxes because they live in apartments, and they vote for referendums every year. We've had 2 in a row that they've passed. My suggestion for that is the referendum should come on your property tax bill with a checkbox. If I want to pay extra money for schools, I check that. If I don't, I don't. And that way the schools have to produce. You know, just like any other business, they produce. And I'm a retired teacher, so don't jump me on school producing stuff. I've been there, I know what they do. But I also think that at a certain age, 70 would be good for me because I'm 71, but you can pick whatever you want. Your house ought to be yours if it's paid for. Period, end of story, and I'm good with that on farms, end of story. You've paid for it. Does that make sense to you? That's it, I'll shut up now.
Just to give you an idea, and not that the bill we put together is the right answer yet, but what it would do is it would eliminate the property tax on a homestead, and a homestead is kind of the term that's used for a home that you own and you live in it, and it would eliminate them entirely with the exception of referendums that have passed. So that would still be in place, but a big chunk of your property tax, and maybe the entire amount of your property tax if you live in a county that has not passed a referendum, would be eliminated. But then the question goes back to, okay, that's all fine and good, great, awesome, let's get rid of that. But what are we going to do about the revenue that is currently generated for those dollars, and how are we going to replace that? And what the mechanism that's used in the bill that we put together is each year there would be a calculation on what the property taxes would otherwise be on your home. You would then get 100% credit against that. That would then translate over into the local income tax, and so the schools and the fire departments and the police and the cities and the towns and so forth would be made whole through the LIT process. Now I think about 80 of the counties, when we were doing the calculations, 80 of the 92 counties in Indiana already have sufficient what's referred to as lit capacity, meaning that they could go ahead and increase the current local income tax that the county charges that would fully meet and fully fund the money that has gone away from the elimination of the property tax on homesteads. 12 counties, and it was interesting, the 12 counties, you'd think there'd be some commonality, but there really wasn't. 12 counties would not have sufficient capacity. They're all over the board. Some of them were urban, some of them were suburban, some of them were rural counties. I really couldn't figure out what the connection was between the 12 counties that would not have capacity. But what the bill would do is it would give the counties capacity to fully replace the lost revenue from the elimination of the homestead tax. There's some other bills related to homestead tax elimination. I'm drawing a blank right now. You read so many bills, like Bob was saying, there's a lot of bills. You read so many of them, and there's some that to do with property taxes, but the one I just read, I'm drawing a blank on what their replacement revenue was. But we just have to be careful when we make changes. And you know, I like the lieutenant governor. I'm a little bit leery of her axe the tax idea, just because that's about $8 billion that it generates. Wonderful, let's get rid of that tax. But we still have roads that need to be paved. We still have healthcare issues. We have mental health care issues. We have schools that need to be funded and so forth. So where are we going to get the $8 billion, either in cuts or in other revenue to replace that? So I'm all in on changing things. We can't just keep doing things the way we've always done them. But we need to do it in a kind of a methodical manner and a thoughtful manner to be sure that all of a sudden we don't have to make a big cut in school funding or university funding or road funding or what have you. But I'd love to see the elimination of the homestead property tax. There's winners and losers in that what I just kind of threw out there, right? There's winners. There's always going to be winners and losers. When you move something, somebody's gaining and somebody's losing. So if you think that through, kind of the winners in that scenario would be, generally speaking, retired people, right? They tend to own their homes, so they would benefit by paying lower tax. They're retired, so they don't have earned income that they would have to start paying a higher local income tax on. So they'd kind of be the winners. People that would kind of lose would be people that are working and don't own a home, right? Because they're not getting any tax benefits from the elimination of the homestead tax. Yeah, they're paying higher dollars into the local income tax. We put some increased renters deduction to try to help people in that situation, to try to, I guess, make it fair or make it equal, if you will. But we'll continue to work on it. But boy, I would encourage all of you to keep talking about it with your legislators, because. And you know, you said you're from Monroe County, so talk to the legislators that represent Monroe County, and if you have family and friends in other counties, try to get that moving forward, because well, try to keep that on our radar screen, because we do hear a lot about property taxes. I promise you that, and but we tend to hear the most when there's big increases. And there's been a lot of big increases recently. So I try to encourage all of you to kind of keep that on our radar screen so we can take action on it. Probably not this year, but hopefully we will next year when we're taking a look at a lot of other tax mechanisms in the state of Indiana. So, but thanks for being here. I think you said you were an interloper. Is that what you've heard yourself?
Yeah, 'cause I don't live here.
Yeah. So you're welcome anytime, though.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, and Bob, you still represent part of Monroe County, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, so he does go into Richland, and is it Richland and Bean Blossom Townships?
Yes, those two.
So we do have, not necessarily a county line division here, and every opinion does count, so. Bob,
Well,
do you
and,
wanna
and,
comment on
and
that?
Danny's involved with a couple of my colleagues down there who represent the surrounding area, I guess, of Bloomington in Monroe County. But, and I've talked to Representative Dave Hall about what, I think you have too, Danny, about that. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's, again, when you're talking about taxes and like I said about my buddy earlier about the farmer, but yeah, it's a touchy subject. When I think of, I pay quarterly taxes too. I'm kind of in the insurance business. I'm kind of getting out of that somewhat after 43 and a half years, but I still pay quarterly taxes, and I still have money coming out of my payroll check. But I think if everybody had to pay taxes by writing a check every month, every 3 months or so forth, people would have a different viewpoint when it comes to, by golly, I'm paying a lot in taxes and so forth. But when you're having automatically deducted out, it's kind of like, it's, you're used to that check. But when you physically have to write that check, there'd be a lot of people up in arms about that, in my opinion. So, big issue.
Any other property tax related questions? I'm trying to improve things a little bit, try something a little different this morning. Anybody love taxes that might want to have a question? Okay, I didn't think so. All right. Yeah, so who would like to be our next question? Different topic. Derek.
morning. Derek Morgan, Spencer Owen Community Schools School Board Member. Thank you for being here. A lot of education issues on the short session here, but a couple things from last year's session to make you aware of. So I appreciate the increase that we got in state funding to the education fund. Everybody has seen a raise at Spencer Owen Community Schools, so that money's being spent well, being put into the pockets. Also, some friends of mine who are state troopers appreciate the increase that they received, and that was that increase does a lot of good for families here in Owen County. So appreciative of that. Some bills in this session, get them in front of me, to encourage some support on. One is headed over to the House, Senate Bill 30. I appreciate Senator Bassler's vote in favor of that. That is the school bus stop arm violation enforcement bill that has failed the last 2 sessions. And it is staggering to me the number of people who get away with those violations without anything, any sort of citation or punishment for that. It is scary to see the number of people who blow by school bus stop arms. Hopefully in the House that will pass. I encourage you to vote in favor of that. Representative Eaton. Now a House bill, let me find it, or Senate Bill 185. I encourage your support of that one. That is student use of cellular telephones that would allow local control of the issue of whether student or how student use of cell phones during the school day is implemented, but it would put some teeth and allow us to be able to ban them during instructional time, which I think we talked about, the impact of lots of things in our community that have negative effects, and cell phones on young minds is not great. Now the enforcement of that, that'll fall on us, and I'm sure we're gonna have a lot of upset parents about that one, but during instructional time, students cannot multitask with cell phones, and I encourage your support. It hasn't made it out of committee yet. I think it it was in the education committee, and they heard it the other day and vote on it until this week, but hopefully as that works its way through. I encourage your support on that one, and I encourage you in the House to oppose House Bill 1376. It is a bill on it is a property tax connection here. It would only allow for school boards to implement referendum during general elections, which would basically, here locally, because we don't have municipal elections in the a countywide municipal, it doesn't, our corporation is outside of a municipality. So we would only be allowed to put a referendum on the ballot every 2 years, which if there were a shortfall, we've never had a referendum, not planning to have a referendum, but if the need arose for us to go to the taxpayers, so let's say in mid-2022, we wouldn't be able to get that onto the ballot until this November of 2024, which would hamstring our efforts to be able to go to our taxpayers to make that request to our taxpayers, and would, I think, negatively impact our ability to operate and ensure that we have the proper funding to provide good education here in Owen County. So that's what I have for you. Thank you.
Okay, Derek, good to see you. It's been since April. I haven't seen you, but yeah, so House Bill 1376, authored by Bob Baining. So there's a chance it might get a hearing in the education. He's head of education in the House, but I haven't heard anything about it, anything at all. So
Actually, it was heard in election.
Okay. He's on election committee too, on that committee, isn't he? But anyway, I don't know where that's at. now exactly, and I haven't heard a lot of back and forth about it yet. But I think, and this goes back a few years ago, but I know a lot of people, though, would like to have it in a general election because there's more people that vote in the general election. And I think that's the intent, to get more people involved and more to vote yes or no or whatever the issue happens to be. So on the Senate Bill 185, the cell phone issue, you said something about, some parents might like it, some might not, but I think a lot of parents would like that, I would think. And, yeah, because I think every time you turn around, I look over and I see a young person that they're right there on their phone and doing whatever. But and Senate Bill 30, we'll take a look at that too. And it's a low number there in the Senate, so that means it's pretty important that we're going to deal with. So I'll be looking for that as well.
All right, do we have any other education-related questions? And we'll have Superintendent Klein over here ask the next one.
Well, good morning to both of you again, and thank you for being out this morning. And I would like to piggyback a little bit on board or in addition to what Mr. Morgan had said in respect to the cell phones, and kind of point to Senate Bill 141, which calls for a study council or a study committee to look at the discipline and truancy issues. When you convene that committee or that study council, I would also ask you to draw in representatives from probation and from the courts, because we can monitor cell phones, and we do it all the time now. Our current handbooks of Spencer-Owen Schools says there shouldn't be phones out in the classrooms. And I think back to my time as an assistant principal at Indian Creek and a principal at Indian Creek in Johnson County, and had the same rules. And there wasn't a day that didn't go by that there weren't a half dozen phones sitting on my desk because I got buzzed to the classroom to go get the phone because it went off or the kid was talking on it. But I ask you to involve probation in the courts to put a little bit more teeth in this. And that also speaks in 141 about the attendance and the truancy issues. Same thing, we need some more help with attendance and truancy, because we had a leadership study council meeting with our principals and directors this past week, and that was one of the things we discussed. And we send out volumes of letters to our parents. It's, you've had 10 days of absence, you've had 15 days of absence. We try to involve probation or the courts. We don't get very much. We don't pick up much tread. And I say that because, again, I think back to my experiences as an assistant principal at Indian Creek. I knew if I had an attendance issue when I was dealing with Hensley and Nineveh Township, which was Johnson County courts, I wasn't going to get much leave. I wasn't going to make much progress. But if I had problems with my kids in Morgantown, who were Jackson Township, and it was the person sitting on the chair, at that time Judge Gray, all I had to do was file a neglect charge with the courts, and the problem was taken care of, because when the parent and the kid showed up in front of Judge Gray, he let them have it with both barrels blasting and made it very succinct: you will show up for school. So I wanted to put those thoughts in your head, to be thinking about those as you progress forward with that into next year, and even if we continue this year. Also, something for you to think about is tax restructuring. One of the things that I've been studying, and I think I've talked to Representative Heaton about this over the years, is I still look at the tax deduction that's available for private and homeschool families for the cost of materials. $1,000 deduction, or it's $1,000 per kid deduction. Now that we've eliminated textbook costs for public and all school families, are we going to eliminate this deduction, or are we going to make it applicable to all of our kids? Because, case in point, this morning, going down to check the schools and check the roads before the day started, I've got 14 kids that are on a bus to Greensburg for an archery competition. Those kids and their families had to buy those arrows and those bows. Those are costs for them to participate in those type of competitions, which are an extension of the school. Now, you can argue that in many different ways, but I would ask whatever tax council or committee, when they start looking at these types of deductions, are we gonna be fair and equitable to everybody? Or are we gonna eliminate private school and homeschool ability to take $1,000 deduction from their taxes every year? Or, I'm sorry, $1,000 credit. Those things, and those are really, I'll keep my eye on the reading bill as it progresses, but you know, I'll brag on Spencer Owen. I mean, we had 100% of our third graders pass IREAD 3 in Gosport, 95% at Patricksburg, 93% at McCormick's Creek, and we had 80% at Spencer Elementary. When you average that out, we're at 88%. So we're doing what needs to be done to make sure our kids are reading proficient, and we're running summer schools already, but I know this is a bigger issue across the entire state, and I just, again, will keep my eye on that as we progress. So, thank you.
May I just for a second, just ask, since you're an educator and you're experienced at this, just real quick regarding the reading challenges that we're having in the state of Indiana. Any thoughts on moving the iRead to second grade versus third grade?
We are putting iRead at second grade this year because principals had already started talking about that last year. And for us, the discussion with the teachers and the principals, it's a no-brainer because it's not a high-risk test for second graders. Just take it, see what happens. If you pass, congratulations, great. If you don't pass, we've already got a built-in remediation plan, or we've got some sense of Timmy or Susie, what they're deficient in, so teachers, as they continue working through the summer, because we'll have professional development and work days through the summer, they'll start building remediation programs or focusing on the needs of those individual kids as we jump into third grade, as we go into August. So I don't see why you wouldn't want to provide it at second grade. I mean, I can still remember my time at Indian Creek as a high school principal. I think you still had the iRead 3 assessment available at a first grade level, at a second grade level, and a third grade level. And we did it up there. That's why when I left up there, I had 95, 96% proficiencies across the entire third grade, and we looked at, again, my job up there was assistant superintendent and watching curriculum and mentoring principals, but 96% proficient. You had, gosh, I can't remember. I remember 96% proficient because it was the highest in Johnson County, and it really stuck in the craw of the folks at Center Grove and Greenwood because tiny little Indian Creek was kicking their behind, so to speak. So, but we monitor those things, and I don't see why you wouldn't continue monitoring them.
I hope I have just two more questions on this specific issues. I don't want this to dominate the whole day, but is it your sense that, let's say, even kindergarten and first grade, and surely by second grade, are they starting to get a good feel or a good indication whether a child is struggling with reading that early on?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I mean, teachers know their kids. I mean, I hate to say it, I mean, some of our teachers see their kids more than their parents do. I mean, from 8 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, 180 days out of the year, and they know that. And that's, again, no fault of the parent because...
So then if we were to build in a structure the next year's budget to fund earlier intervention, you would be able to start intervening earlier with young children, is that right?
Correct. And I'll piggyback on this. I mean, we've already, again, challenging and I'll say forcing the building principals. We're going to pilot the new state assessment model that's coming all of next year. So we're, in lieu of the formative assessment 3 times a year, we're going to jump in with the new iLearn or whatever it's going to be called, and we're going to see what it tells us with those quarterly check-ins. So we'll be really interested to use that data and see what kind of a mechanism it provides us, because if I'm understanding that correctly, when you get to the fourth assessment at the end of the year or in the spring, That's gonna be the assessment that quote-unquote the schools are gonna be graded on across the state. So we're not waiting for I-Learn results in late June or late May, early June. It's gonna be instantaneous when we take it in mid or late April, mid-May.
Very, very good. Thank you for your input. Appreciate that.
All right, Marcy, we're going to have Tony, and is it education? It is. Perfect. That's fine, that's fine. We'll have Tony do the next question.
Tony Volker, thanks guys for coming. I do have a quick comment on the superintendent's question. If you're looking at the how much we give homeschool parents, I think it's fair to say how many dollars do we allot per public school kid, and then how much do the homeschool kids get? Because those homeschool families, which we were, and I'm a huge advocate of that, we still pay property taxes and we still pay a lot of money toward those schools. So if you're talking about equity, I think it's still considerably higher on the public education side. Anyway, my question was, according to your sheet here, Bob, it shows 10% to higher education of our budget. So that's about $4.4 billion. Excuse me. Can you tell me what that money is going for, and has it been looked at in regard to, or in along with, I guess, maybe, what these schools have in terms of foundation money? Because I apologize, I don't have those figures handy, but I know nationally most of these higher education universities, et cetera, they have huge endowments, just huge. So I'm just kind of curious, that's $4.4 billion that we're spending, and I would like to know if you could just kind of give us a heads up on what that money's going for and why we're spending that much on higher education. Thank you.
Well, Tony, appreciate the question, and I don't know the figures as far as what the breakdown would be and so forth on that. And I had this discussion just a couple days ago in Terre Haute about some of the money that goes to higher ed. When it comes to capital, renovation of buildings and so forth, like I told some people down in Bloomington here about at the Stone Belt facility that I was at about 7, 8 years ago, and I pointed over behind me. I told those people there, I said, a lot of these buildings here at IU, they're your buildings. You paid for them, okay? Because it's funded by taxpayer money and so forth. And people sometimes forget about that. At NES State, we've got an issue with them right now because their enrollment about 7, 8 years ago was at a little over 14,000 students, okay? Now they're around 8,000, all right? And they made some cuts, and I was told yesterday that they actually did make these cuts of about $12 million. And really some of the employees at NES State, they didn't like it because they had to maybe leave. They got let go because of the money. So it boils down to we have to, you still want to fund higher ed, but at what level? I think that's what it boils down to. The thing I like about Purdue University versus the rest of the public schools, per se, is that when they come to us and say, hey, we need funding for their veterinarian animal hospital up there. And this was about, 5, 6 years ago. And so being involved in Ways and Means, I went up there and I took a tour. And that original veterinarian hospital building and so forth was built, I think, in 1956 or 1957. And it most certainly looked like it was built back then. And so we kicked in quite a bit of money. And really, when you think of a veterinarian school for animals, you think of Purdue, really, here in the Midwest, I would say. And so, and I saw their end result, and I think Senator Bassler and I were up there too. We took that tour because he's involved in the funding through the Senate when it comes to higher ed. So it's something where, we do kick in a lot of money, but the thing I like about Purdue is that and that's the old Mitch Daniels thing, is skin in the game. What Purdue does, they says, well, we need 140 million for this project, whatever it may be, but we're going to kick in 35 million of our own money. And so they come and ask the state for the other remaining 105 million and so forth. And they do that time and time again. And I get on Indiana State, you know, and my neighbors up there, and they just quiet when I made that question to them, you know. And so, again, you're paying for it, ladies and gentlemen, as far as when it comes to that kind of funding and so forth. And then they say also, as far as if they get X amount of dollars, you know, then we don't have to raise our tuition, you know, and that type of thing. Well, you know, and Purdue, I think it's been 12 years since they raised their tuition. And they really pride themselves on it's less than $10,000, you know. Now it is $9,992. It's $8 from $10,000, but still it's less than $10,000. And then people, the critics will say, well, about Purdue, yeah, but if you're in engineering or you're in this profession and so forth, there are fees, extra fees you have to pay. Well, I don't know, those fees might be $600, $700. I don't know what those numbers are, but that's true, you know. But on the other hand, if you're coming out of there, and my niece just did, my older brother's granddaughter just graduated from Purdue with electrical engineering degree, and she's set. You know, she can go anywhere she wants and so forth when it comes to that kind of degree. But there again, they'll pay a little extra for that because they'll get it back. You know, and it's just like, you know, my daughter went to Purdue and pharmacy, and I've said this before, but her first job was at Riley Children's Hospital as a pharmacist, making $92,000, and this was, I think, about 15 or so years ago, 16, and she could have went to Walgreens and got $105,000 starting out, and she says, now, Dad, don't get upset. I didn't take the Walgreens position, but I feel like I can do better with Riley Children's Hospital. And I said, honey, I said, absolutely. I mean, it's your deal. I only paid for 4 years of your schooling, not 6. So you take it from there. But again, it boils down to, and this is another whole subject, you know, the kids or the students, they got to want it. They got to have that goal out there. And it like, you know, maybe Dr. Klein would say, you know, it starts with the parents, you know, at home and so forth, and what they want to achieve and all. But
yes, quick follow-up again, education related.
Yes. So, and I just for the record, I am not anti-higher education. I love school. If somebody would pay me to be a professional student, my family could testify, that's what I would do all my life. So I have no problem with that. What I'm talking about, and I thank you, Bob, for your input on that, and I don't know how Indiana does this, but many states do not charge taxes on those foundation monies. And they're huge foundations, and their tuitions just keep going up and up and up, and they ask the state for more and more money on a regular basis. So I'm looking, you know, more from that aspect. And I get where, you know, there's huge capital projects like that institution would not be able to fund on their own, and they need, you know, state monies to help with that. But I love that model that you just said with Purdue, and maybe that ought to become a rule. Maybe that every university, you know, based on what their size is and what they're able to, maybe they should have to have some skin in the game. But at any rate, that's where I'm focused at, and I'm wondering if we tax the foundations in this state for the universities.
Yeah, good question. We would not tax the revenue or the profits on their investments or what have you, dividend income, interest income, and that goes back to it being a nonprofit organization. But you know, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but a huge percentage of that number, the let's just say $4 billion, would be for the operating revenue, kind of just your day-to-day operations. I will say that I think our universities are at least headed in the right direction. From probably about, I think the study started in the year for the year maybe 1980 or 1982, and it ran up through about 2015 or so, and it evaluated inflation for higher education versus the general inflation rate. And inflation at the higher ed was more than twice the general inflation rate. And that leads to all sorts of problems, doesn't it? It starts pricing a certain group of people out of the potential for a higher education, or it causes them to go into more debt than maybe they would otherwise have to go into, which again, that proposes challenges for the 22-year-old college grad that gets out with a lot of student loan debt. But I will say that it was about, let's see, this is 24, so it was probably about 3 budgets ago. So if the next budget is 25, subtract 6 years, so it's probably the 19 budget or maybe the 17 budget. That's when we really started putting kind of some pressure on higher ed to start trying to keep their costs more along the lines of the general inflation rate. They've done a good job with that. As Bob mentioned, I mean, Purdue's done an exceptional job with that. And to a certain extent, there's peer pressure then, isn't there? If one university starts doing those kind of things and keeping their costs down, it starts putting pressure on the other ones to minimize tuition increases. And so they're at least headed in the right direction with kind of trying to keep those costs down. But and I have to admit though, when I see, like, Julie and I have 5 children, and 4 of them are either in college or they've graduated, and then we still have one in K-12. And I don't want it to be like when I was there and there was no air conditioning in the dorms or anything. I'm okay with air conditioning and stuff. That's fine. But I do look at some of the structures like, oh man, do we really need this nice of structures and this elaborate of whatever bathrooms or what have you? But we're going to continue to put pressure on them to try to keep their costs down. We also have what's called a performance funding formula, and a certain portion of the budget each year for higher ed is put into a performance funding formula that the universities are required, well, not required, I guess, if they meet certain metrics and achieve certain goals, then they will get those additional dollars released to them. And I would like to eventually see it be 10% of the budget, because I think that there are certain things that we should expect from our higher ed universities. And depending upon the universities, there's different metrics, because as you can imagine, we've got the 2 flagship universities, IU and Purdue, and then we have the other public universities, which are very valuable and important to us, but they would tend to have different students than maybe that would typically go to IU or Purdue, different things that they're trying to accomplish. Like, for example, quite often when you look at ISU or Vincent University, those are first-time students, and nobody in their family's ever gone to college before, and so there's going to be more challenges that they have to kind of get them to persist and continue on than maybe an IU or Purdue would have with a typical student that goes there. So I think that performance funding formula is very important to keep that in place. But we are heading the right direction. We are starting to see the not that they're decreasing, but they're just not increasing costs as much as they used to be. So just FYI about that.
Thanks for the question, Bob.
Yeah. Tony, thanks for the question. This is just, it reminded me of what I heard about a week and a half ago, maybe a little bit unrelated to your question, your comments. The friend of mine is from Granger, Indiana. That's in St. Joe County, very near Notre Dame, Representative Dale Devon. And he told me that about a week and a half ago, it was announced in South Bend that Notre Dame kicked in $165 million to have a 150-bed hospital for mental health people who need that for their patients and so forth. And as I've told people, this was last Saturday at our Cracker Barrel town hall that we had, and I mentioned that because a question came up with mental health, and And it takes, the old saying, follow the money. Well, it takes a lot of money. Well, again, I don't know how many billions that Notre Dame has in their foundation or in their endowment, but I want to say it's over 20 billion, it's way up there and so forth. And it's good to see an institution like that to kick in money, big money, for that particular issue, and that's in the South Bend area and so forth. But as I told people over in Terre Haute last week, the old saying, just follow the money. But, it takes hundreds of millions of dollars in certain issues to dealing with, and that's a little bit different than what you're talking about. But talking about the endowments and that type of thing, I mean, it's amazing what, I don't know how much Purdue has, but it's in the, it's over $1 billion, I know that, but, and I think IU as well and so forth. But it's, I don't know as far as, we've got some discussions up at the State House about higher ed and what's happening there and so forth. But it's something that's on people's radar, I know that, on some things.
All right, so let's move on to a different subject besides education. And who else has a question? We've got some hands over here. This side is quiet now. So let's head over here. Jeff, you're in the back. Let's go back over to the far left side here for a question.
Thank you very much. 3 points of gratitude first. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for the high-speed internet support you've brought to the state. It's very important. And personal privilege, thank you. I think we were, if not the first, among the first equine patients at that new equine hospital in Purdue. And let me tell you, they descended upon that horse. It was really cool. Okay, enough of that. Okay. Segment about nature. We'll be back next year with forest legislation. We do think there are special places we're saving. Now, in this session, there is Senate Bill 246. Senator Glick's bill on wetlands, we urge you to support that. The bill on bobcats is Senate Bill 241. I think it's either 241 or 231, sorry. And there, we'd like it if the bill were a little more specific about what the DNR could do. It doesn't seem today that it needs to be able to decide when and if there are hunting seasons for bobcats. Okay, Senate Bill 14. Senate Bill 14 authorizes the Attorney General, the Secretary of State, and all of their employees to carry firearms in the State House and the State House complex. My question is, what? Okay. The State House complex is behind magnetometers, and to my way of thinking, there's no need for this, and there's less equality across the State House. If you're going to do this, just take down the magnetometers and let everybody carry firearms in the State House. I urge you to vote no on this legislation. I mean, it's not fair. I mean, I don't get it. Okay. Now, my two areas that are really important to me. Do something about road funding next year, okay? There was a bill last year to change the weight of funding for local to 26% of our funding money. By the way, our counties get about 1/4 of the money per mile as the state highways. It's just not sustainable. And I don't know whether we're going to get any money from the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. How about flipping that ratio just for that money? And back to Owen County. I think we're going to build a jail here in Owen County. And reflecting back to this mentally ill situation, a portion of the current inmates are mentally ill. And is there anything we can do with the mental health initiative to either offload the jail, allowing us to build a smaller jail, or at least to curb recidivism? These people are mentally ill, they get shoved in the jail, and then they never get cured, and they come back to the jail. We can't have a 700-bed jail. We just can't do that. Thank you. I know it's too many questions, sorry.
Either one of you want to jump in on any of
Just,
those
just,
items?
yeah, just real quick, I got good notes on all your points. And we've talked about this before, how probably one of the blunders, if you will, that we've made over the last number of years is turning local jails into, I mean, to a certain extent, kind of mental health facilities. Our jails are just not really equipped to be mental health facilities. So we've got to continue to do a better job of providing mental health outside the criminal justice system. And we're trying to do that through the last budget where we did additional funding. We wanted, you know, the saying was when you call 911, an ambulance comes. And then I think the mental health is maybe 988, I believe. Nobody comes when you call that hotline. And so we're trying to get a mechanism in place where someone would come when you have a mental health crisis, just as when you would have some type of a physical health crisis. So we'll continue to try to do more of that, which the challenge being is that's not going to solve the problem today. That's going to be a process that takes time. But as any sheriff would tell you, we've done it. That's what we've turned our jails into, is mental health facilities, and that's just never going to work. It's just not the way things are set up for jails are supposed to be for criminals and not people who are suffering from mental health challenges.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, for being here. I was kind of worried at first because I said, where is he at? And then you came in, so you're a loyal participant. Appreciate that. Yeah, all these are Senate bills, and I haven't looked at them. And Senate Bill 14, was that Senator Tom's maybe, or his bill? Okay, I kind of thought when come with firearms. And then the Bobcat issue also. I was at a dinner last night, and the one guy brought up the Bobcat situation and so forth. The thing of it is, I'm guessing Senate Bill 14 won't go anywhere. But a few years ago, we had a bill. I think maybe it was Representative Jim Lucas. I think, you know, a lot of people know Senator Lucas, and a great patriot, great guy from Seymour, Indiana. And I want to say it was him that had a bill that will allow our legislative assistants and interns to carry, okay? And at first you might think, well, why that, you know? Because we can, okay, in the State House. And probably a third of us do, okay? So, and I'm a pretty big guy, and not that would intimidate somebody, but being 6'5", 250. But we have these little interns and girls, and 5 foot, 102 pounds. And when they're walking out of there at the State House late at night, going to the parking lot 2 blocks away, well, who's there to protect them? And so there was a bill a few years ago that said that that would allow them to carry when they're coming in and then leaving and so forth. But that didn't go anywhere. But that was the sense of why that bill was filed back then and so forth. But I don't believe they're able to do that. But so. But on the Bobcat issue, a friend of mine last night, he's got about 100 acres down by Graysville, Indiana, just kind of west of Sullivan. But he's got all kind of bobcats down there, and he showed me where there was a trap, and a bobcat got caught and so forth, and they got him out. And so, but there's getting to be a big issue about bobcats and so forth, and I'll take a look at some of these bills and see, kind of follow them, but appreciate the comment on that.
All right, we've got time for some more questions right here in the front, Marcy.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lisa Robinson from Monroe County, and I take care of patients from Owen County. So can you speak, Senator Bassler, about Senate Bill 3 and maybe some details about how the prior authorization work you're doing would affect physicians in their offices directly?
I'm ashamed to say that I can't really address that. I'm not that familiar with
No,
that.
okay.
I apologize for that, I really do. I'm happy to look into it and discuss it later, if that's okay with you. Sure. As you may know, I mean, the things we deal with get really complicated quickly, and healthcare has just been an area that I've not much focused on, but I'm happy to kind of dig into it and talk with you later. Is that okay to do that? I apologize.
All right, Baron, next question. Marcy will bring you the microphone.
Legs are bad. It's Baron Eugene Barnett, resident here of Owen County. I'm the trustee for Jackson Township up in the northwest corner. The people that I work with, and not only myself, they've told me they're not really super keen on this idea of this work, the thing they've got for education. It's a work-based accounting for that. They think it's a bad idea, and the reason why is because they believe it's another lowering the standards for education. In other words, if you do a job, then you just say, well, I can get my degree because I've done this in the past. It's a work credit type thing, okay? And they think it's really a bad idea, and I do too. So that's one issue. The other issue that comes from the people up there is the backload on the court system. I know we're not involved in that particularly, but the problem is we got guys in jails up there that's been there for like 8 or 9 months, you know what I'm saying, and they still haven't gone to court yet, okay? And then a lot of the people that I work with up there, they only make like $900 a month. I mean, that's, SSI and all the other Medicaid. The thing about it is there's a lot of poor people up there that just are challenged economically and mentally and physically, and it's a pivotal situation. And I'm doing everything I can, but the point about it is it needs to be looked at from a state level, in my opinion. It's a big program, because I'm not the only township that's got that problem. The other thing that they bothered with me about was they made so much money, from the various programs and things that they're involved with, but the buying power of their money's changed. So their landlords came to them and said, well, instead of paying $550 a month, it's $750 now. Well, they're not set up for that anyway. I mean, they can't handle it, and the food costs and everything else. So that's another problem. And the last thing I'm going to bring up is I've had a lot of people complain to me about car lights. I know that sounds silly, but they're going down the road, and just the population up there is so old that are around me that when they're driving, okay, then these super high intensity light bulbs on these trucks and cars are so bright that they can't hardly see. So I think there should be a law passed or a bill so that you can have so many foot, candle power, 1 foot from the headlight, you measure with a meter, and if it exceeds so many candle power, then it's illegal. And I think that's the only way to restrict that. But the car lights really bothered them. They don't have it. Their money is no good anymore. They can't buy what they need. The inflation's got them. They don't like the court system because they're in jail for so long, and they're so backlogged. They can't even get a trial or anything. And the education system, they think, is broken from the standpoint that if you're going to change laws and just keep lowering the standards so everybody passes, then that form of socialism is not going to work in the long run for us as a people. So those are the things I wanted to bring up. And if you want to comment, it's okay. If not, but at least I got a chance to get the people's ideas across the things that's bothering people around.
Hey, Baron, I'm glad you're here. You wrote me a letter in September, and I want to talk to you afterwards about that. I think dealing with maybe education, I think it was. Okay, so I'd like to talk to you. The car lights, I'm not sure. But the House Bill 1001, I think, were you referring to that bill? Was that it? Yeah. Well, the thing of it is, bottom line is, again, we all know that not everybody's cut out to go to IU or Purdue or Indiana State, whatever the case may be. But if we can kind of entice them, so to speak, with a grant money to be a plumber, electrician, whatever the case, those are very valuable professions and occupational classes that we need to focus on too a lot. And so, you know, I didn't go that route. I went business administration with marketing at Indiana State and graduated. But my brother Tom, he wasn't cut out for college. He went to junior college in Southeastern in Harrisburg, Illinois for about a week, got homesick, came back to his high school sweetheart, and they got married a year or so later. But Tom, he was a IBEW 725 member out of Terre Haute for 40 plus years, retired a couple years ago. And by golly, he's financially secure because he's, you know, he's about a year and a half younger than me. But anyway, he's enjoying life. And again, that was Tom's thing. All right, Bob, me, I went another route. And I know, again, everybody's all over the place on that. And so it's something where House Bill 1001 is kind of an extension of House Bill 1002 from last year and so forth. And so anyway, it's I think it's going to come to a vote here shortly, but we're taking a look at it and so forth, but I appreciate the comments.
All right, let's do one more question here that we can fit in. Chad.
Yeah, I'm curious what you think about having the fourth highest state gas tax and having the 1 cent increase that we're supposed to have on the excise tax in July that was changed back in last year to go for the next 4 years, 1 cent per year on the excise tax every year. Owen County, we got to watch 46 get redone this year and 43, and these are two of our better roads in the county. As Jeff was talking about, the funding mechanisms at the state level where the funding for our local roads, is there anything that's going to change where we can get more money for our local roads? We're paying plenty of money for roads. There's no doubt about that. I mean, on top of the gas taxes and everything, the double taxing we have, the sales and the excise tax, we're paying out the nose at the B&B as well. So anything going to happen to get our roads in shape? Our local officials, their thing's money. They don't have the money to fix the roads. It's not because we're not paying. So what are we going to do to get our local government what they need to fix our roads properly?
Well, appreciate the question. I think a few years ago, it was formed a community crossing road funding, and for I don't know if there's any commissioners in here, but I think recently that just went up from $1 million to, and there's a match, $1 million to 1.5, I believe. And so again, and I've had every a lot of commissioners within my district said a few years ago, Bob, keep that coming. We really need it. And so not only is keeping coming, we're increasing that. But it's, again, we talk about the funding. I think the gasoline tax went into effect in July 1st of 2017. Okay, and before that, a year before that, we were talking about it. And I told people back home and in the town halls, I said, you know, we wouldn't be having this discussion if the price of a gallon of gas was $4, okay? We're not going to take it from $4 to $4.10 if the price of gas per gallon was $4 at the time. Well, back then in 2017, on July 1st, 2017, on that Saturday, I think that was the 1st of July. The price of gas at Thornton's at 46 and I-70 in Terre Haute on the east side went from $2.03 up to $2.13 once that kicked in. And you know what? And we would go right by there to go to church, you know. And nobody at church complained about by golly, the price of gas went from $2.03 down up to $2.13. And that's what happened. That's exactly what happened on July 1st, 2017 in Vigo County. I don't know about, but I think overall it was about $2 or something per gallon, that type of thing. But again, and we talk about infrastructure, You know, Indiana is either first or second in the nation as far as when it comes to infrastructure. You know, there's a big issue right now about, and they brings it up in Terre Haute, about I-70, and then others about I-65, widening that from 4 lanes to 6 lanes. And then the question is, okay, who's going to pay for that? That's another thing too. Is it going to be, you know, truckers from out of state? Or are they going to have a separate lane and that type of thing? But it all boils down to funding. And anymore, and I drive I-70 to Indianapolis. I know some of my colleagues, if on the west side, they take Highway 40, but because maybe the safety issue and so forth. But it's it's a problem. But again, the tax, you know, take it from here to there. But somebody's got to fund, you know, whether it's the local roads, the state, and the interstate highway system and so forth. But again, as we had this discussion a while back, we weren't going to increase anything whatsoever. If you were looking at $4.25 a gallon back in the day, it wasn't going to increase up. But since it was around $2, and people can manage that, you know, and my guess. I don't like it, and I know when I look for the cheapest place, I go to Sam's Club, and I got some gas a couple days ago at $2.99, but a lot of places at $3.19, of course, and then now it's here we go again. It's starting to go this way, you know, and so it's frustrating. But I think the community crossing grant was going to be kicked up to about $1.5 million, I believe.
Just maybe a couple brief comments. There are 2 taxes that are on gasoline, on fuel. One is the sales tax. So you go buy a pen, you pay a sales tax on that. You buy your shoes, your boots, what have you. You go out to eat. There's sales tax, and there's sales tax on gasoline. Then there's also the excise tax that you referred to. It used to be that the sales tax on gasoline went into the general fund and was used just like the sales tax on any other article or item you would buy. And the excise tax was what was used to fund construction of roads and bridges and so forth. I can't remember what year we passed the road funding bill. Was that 17 or 19? Do you recall? 17. And so over, I believe it was a 6-year period, we were going to gradually transition the sales tax that was collected on gasoline to also be used for road funding. We didn't do it all at once, just because the general fund was relying upon that revenue for the general funding of government and so forth. And so that's one of the things that allowed us to start doing the community crossings. And as we continue to push community crossings in the next budget, we'll continue to push for the fact that kind of rural counties and smaller towns have an advantage over their larger cities when it comes to community crossings. If I'm not mistaken, Anton, I think it's a 3-to-1 match, right? I think the locals put in 25% and the state puts in 75% of the funding for community crossings. If the county is less than 50,000 and the city is less than 10,000. So that's obviously an advantage to kind of small towns and rural counties. And you can bet that Bob and all of the senators and House members from rural Indiana are going to continue to push that when we come across the next budget. Plus, we're going to continue to push for additional funding into community crossings, because my sense is when I talk to local officials and local people that has done a lot of good work when it comes to repairing roads and paving maybe new roads if you've had gravel roads, fixing bridges and so forth. Now, one challenge we have, and we studied it this past summer, and we're going to continue to study it this coming summer, as there are more and more vehicles that are hybrid or electric vehicles, for example, and there's getting to be more and more of those, we see it all the time, that pushes down what? The consumption of gasoline, which has an impact on both those taxes I just referred to, the sales tax and the excise tax. We don't have a good answer to that yet. Hopefully we'll have I'm not so sure there is a good answer, but hopefully we'll have an answer for it by the end of this coming summer on what are we going to do going forward, because that will probably be in the next budget. And I can't help but think there's going to be some type of like right now, hybrids and electric cars pay a higher registration. Every time you renew your license plates, you pay the registration fees. They pay a higher fee to try to counteract the fact that they're not using gas, therefore they're not, or at least they're not using as much gas, therefore they're not paying into road construction. So we'll continue to kind of cross that bridge and figure out how exactly we do that. But that's going to be challenging because, as you can imagine, people don't want to pay a per mile charge. Number one, they don't want to either put a tracker on their car so the government knows how much miles they're driving. Number two, you just can't expect someone from the license branch to come out and check your mileage when you every year to somehow keep track of it that way. There's pros and cons about towing, especially the interstates. So I can't help but think one mechanism is going to be some type of higher charge for the registration of hybrids and electric vehicles. But we'll continue to try to push. I mean, our infrastructure, like Bob said, it's better than probably most of the 50 states, but yet we still have things we need to work on, bridges and roads primarily, and we'll continue to fund as much dollars as possible towards those. And we'd like to show them out to the locals as much as possible because they know best how to handle the roads in their county or their town or their city.
Yeah, I just one follow-up, and when it comes to that registration, I think 2 or 3 years ago we might have added that in there. I think Representative Soliday, who was at the time chair of Transportation Committee, that was included. So for you people that own a EV, and when you renew your license, you'll see an increase there, and it says right on there what that amount of extra money that you're paying for that. I don't know the exact figure, but my son-in-law's his mom and dad, great people from Morgan County, Martinsville. I think they're on their 4th electric vehicle, and they made a comment to me. Glenn made a comment to me a while back. Bob, we're paying extra for that, but I'm good with it though. And so forth. But that was done a few years ago, I think, and I don't know how much that brings in, but it's out there.
That is our last question that we just talked about, and I will say that Owen County has budgeted the full match for the 1.5 million, so we're already set financially locally to support that, and the commissioners are asking for the full 1.5 million, so that's good for Owen County. Well, we really appreciate everybody coming out this morning for our first legislative breakfast. Our next one is going to be on February the 17th, right here at this same location and same time. We want to thank the Owen County State Bank, Main Street Coffee, Owen Valley Christian Fellowship, and the Chamber for hosting and making this possible. And again, if you have any follow-up questions for our legislators, they may stick around a little bit following. We wish you a safe trip home, and thank you again for coming out.